Just continue on with the series we started last week. And last week we're kind of saying, well, the resolutions, and this is kind of a part of the New Year's, because in New Year's we always make resolutions. And what I want to kind of try to challenge people is to let's think, besides just kind of inwardly focusing, let's focus on where God wants us to set our resolutions. What resolution, if Jesus were here and guiding us, would he want us to be setting for ourselves for this year? And we started last week by saying, well, the most important thing always was the heart. Where's your heart set? Is your heart set on God, or is it set elsewhere? And one of the analogies used last week was the analogy of sailing, because you tack in sailing, and which means you're going back and forth in the water according to weather. And if you don't have your eye fixed on a target outside of the boat, you will never be able to find your way. So you have to set your heart outside of your boat, and that was what we talked about last week. This week we're continuing on with that, and if we're going to keep the nautical theme just for a moment, I kind of have to give a little warning, because in the words of the great Captain Barbossa,
"You're off the edge of the map, mate. Here there be monsters."
We're moving into an area that some people don't like to even think about, right? We're going to be talking today about curses, devourers, and thieves. This is the area of the Bible that sometimes gets controversial for some people. It's funny, I talk to people and they say, well, I believe in Jesus, I believe in God, but I have a hard time believing devil, Satan, demons, devourers, all that. And my response to that, well, that's interesting, because Jesus believed in it. And the Bible writes about it all throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it's interesting that we say, well, we believe in Jesus, but not what Jesus said about this. And I don't even know how you can do that. If Jesus is our leader and our Lord and our Savior, it's hard for me to say, well, Jesus was wrong about this. Or Jesus was maybe being a little bit, he was trying to give some symbolism here. And so it's hard for me to accept that. And so we're going to go walking straight into this. And we're going to walk through what God said about curses, devourers, and thieves, because it has to do with the second part of our resolution, which is protection. How do you protect your family? How do you protect your things? How do you protect your soul and your life? And so that's what we're going to be talking about. And in order to do that, we kind of have to go back to the beginning, and we're going to examine how this started. This is, by the way, sort of my family motto these days, it seems. This is probably said in my house about once a week, maybe more. Nothing's easy. Ever since we bought a house, started renovation, and decided to start a church within a month of each other, it just seems nothing is ever easy. We think back to a time that maybe they were easy, but those days are long gone. And every time something messes up, somebody will look up and they'll get frustrated, and the other person in the family will say, well, nothing's easy. It's like, this is nothing new to us, right? We should all know nothing is easy. And it's true, I know that we're not the only family that's figured this out, but have you ever wondered why? Why is nothing easy? And again, in order to do that, we go back to the very beginning, to Adam and Eve. Now, again, I kind of give a little disclaimer here, because I don't know where everybody is on this, but I find when I talk to people about Genesis and Adam and Eve, I get people saying, well, that's kind of a symbolic story, right? That didn't really happen. And I guess my response to that would be twofold. First of all, I believe it did honestly happen. But even if you're saying, well, it's just a story, so are the parables of Jesus. And this was something, Genesis, written by Moses, inspired by the Holy Spirit, because obviously Moses wasn't there. So Moses wrote this down as it was revealed to him by the Holy Spirit, and so it contains spiritual truths no matter how you think about it. So we're going to walk back into Genesis, and we're going to dig up those spiritual truths. And everybody knows the story about how Adam and Eve were in the garden, and God said, you know, this is all yours except that over there. You can't have that. And of course, the Bible never tells us what the fruit is. Traditionally, we call it an apple. I'm not sure why. But Mark Twain had an interesting quote. He said, Adam and Eve did not eat the apple because they wanted the apple. They ate it because it was forbidden. And then he finishes the quote by saying, if God wanted to help, he should have made the snake forbidden, and then they would have eaten the snake. And I think that Mark Twain pretty much has the human nature thing caught there. But we know that they did eat the forbidden fruit. And then God comes in and everything changes. God had warned them not to do this, warned them that if you do this, there was going to be consequences. They did it anyway, and God steps in. And the consequences are 3 curses, and we're going to talk about curses in a second. The first one, and this is my belief, by the way, is the fruit wasn't an apple, it was a potato. Because if you look at Genesis 3, they play the first game of hot potato. Because he comes to Adam and says, well, did you eat from the tree which I commanded you should not eat? And of course God knew, but gives Adam a chance. And the man said, well, the woman you gave me, she's to blame. So God turns to the woman and says, did you, and what's this that you've done? And the woman said, well, the serpent deceived me. So it says playing hot potato here. And of course the serpent can't talk, so he's done. So then God comes down with 3 curses following this. And so he says to the serpent first, he says, for this you're going to be despised, and the serpent loses its legs, and it's going to crawl on the ground forever. And there's going to be enmity between man and snake forever, and man will be crushing its head with his boot. And you kind of get the sense that that moment Adam and Eve look at each other and go, okay, so the serpent got it. But God's not done. Then he turns back to the woman. He says, I'm going to multiply your sorrow in conception. In pain you shall bring forth children, and your desire will be for your husband, and he shall lord over you. What this is saying is, you're going to have pain in childbirth, but you're still going to want to be a mother. And so this is not going to, it's not like, well, then I won't do it. You're going to still desire that, and you're going to bring forth children only in pain now. And of course, we have mothers in the family. They could certainly tell you about that better than I could. And then he turns to the man, in case the man thinks he's getting off, and he says, cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you shall eat it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the herb of the field, and the sweat of your face you shall eat your bread. What he's saying is, you used to work and it was easy. Life used to be easy back then. But the curse hits the ground. And he's saying you're still going to plant, but all of a sudden now the things that come up besides what you planted are thorns and thistles. It's not going to be just the fruit alone. It's going to have things that you're not going to want in there too. And it doesn't matter. And the sweat of your face you shall eat your bread. I believe God is saying work is going to exhaust you. So this is the 3-part curse here. It starts with a snake, which we won't spend much time on, goes to the woman, and then ends up with a man. But I don't think those are gender specific. Now, obviously, men can't bear children, but we all create things. And I believe everything we create, and everything we get involved in creating, has pain involved with it. And I believe this is part of that curse. And we know that, especially in our society today, women work as much as the men, and they're not getting out of this either. And it's clearly not just farmers who are cursed. It's all of us, and all the work we set our hands to is cursed. So I guess kind of the good news is there, you're not crazy. Things really are bad, and it does create work, and it doesn't work out the way you want, and it does give us pain. You're not crazy about that.
Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something.
Life is pain. There's no way we get out of that, and that is part of the curse. But it doesn't quite stop there. We're going to talk about what a curse is, because when I came across that and I was preparing this sermon, I thought, I'm really not sure exactly what a curse is. And it seems weird to me that the God who loves us would curse us. That just didn't seem to fit. And so I did a little bit of study on what a curse is. And it's not a very common thing. I guess if you're in New Orleans, it is. But here, we don't curse much, at least that I'm aware of, unless someone's setting curses on me I don't know about. But we know we have these things called curse words, but that's not really what this is talking about here. It's evil or misfortune. This is not the Bible. This is Merriam-Webster. Evil or misfortune that comes as if in response to spoken utterances or as retribution. And then the second thing is the condition that results from such an utterance. So in other words, you get this sense that something is spoken, and then misfortune or evil follows them, and it stays. And the other thing about a curse, which comes out in another definition that I read, is there's something supernatural about the evil. It's not just, I stubbed my toe. There's something about it that's more than that. It's not natural, it's supernatural. So a curse is not judgment. They're not the same thing, because a judgment can be paid and be done. If somebody hits my car and I take them to court, and the judge says, well, you owe him $5,000 to fix his car, and they pay me $5,000, that transaction's finished. That's judgment. And typically when God steps in, he gives judgment because he's the ultimate judge. He's the high judge. But a curse is beyond that. A curse lasts until it's broken. When a curse is given, you can't pay it off and be done with it. A curse stays until it's lifted. And that's a whole new thing there. And when I started praying about this, I said, God, why would that happen? And the idea is that when God created the world, it was perfect. And so picture, I don't know if you guys did any science experiments where you had to have a beaker of pure water. Did you ever have one of those? And because for whatever reason, the water had to be completely pure for the experiment. And so you had this highly distilled, perfect water in this very cleansed beaker. I don't know if you guys did that. And you have it there, and then picture something falling in it, like a leaf. And you can take the leaf out, but guess what? That water's ruined. And as soon as sin entered this world, as soon as disobedience for the first time entered this world was like that water. It's cursed. It's done. And this is what God's saying. This is why he didn't say that I passed my judgment. He's saying this is a curse. This is a curse you brought upon yourself, and you brought it on, and it has ruined this world. And this curse stays. It is not lifted. In fact, if we can see it mentioned throughout the Bible, in Genesis 5, when Noah's father, whose name's Lamech, names him, Noah, the name Noah means comfort. He says, this one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands because of the ground the Lord has cursed. And I could do a long path of this, because this curse about what happened in Genesis stays with us all the way. You look at the New Testament. Hebrews mentions it. For the earth which drinks in the rain that often comes upon it and bears herbs useful for those to whom it is cultivated receives blessing from God, but it bears thorns and briars and is rejected and near to being cursed, whose end is to be burned. So even in Hebrews, Paul is talking about the fact this curse still stands. We have ground, and the ground gets blessed by God. God still pours his blessings down, but the problem is when it hits the ground's cursed. So everything we set our hands to is cursed. The only time the Bible talks about this being lifted is actually in Revelation, when Jesus comes back. And the leaves of the tree were for healing nations, and there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God, the Lamb, Jesus, shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. So at this point, the curse gets lifted, which, by the way, is the end of the story. We're in Revelation now. This is it. And in fact, the interesting thing, if you look in Revelation, people say, I don't know if I want to live in heaven. I don't want to be on a cloud playing a harp for the rest of my life. The Bible actually mentions the fact that God creates a new heaven and a new earth, and that's where we live. So we're still with God. There's no sin, but it's all new now. So that's kind of the history of the curse, if you will. And God's saying that that's just the nature of it. We get born to it. We get born under the curse, and we work, and everything we put our hands to goes bad. So if you look at this, what he's saying, of course, is more than just the farmers are going to have a hard time. He's saying everything you're going to put your hand to, everything, is going to produce what you think it produces, as well as thorns and thistles. It's not going to be easy. Now, thorns and thistles are interesting because if you do any kind of cultivation, if you've done any farming or gardening or things, this is actually a double-edged sword for you, the thorns and the thistles. Because I have so much ground, and in my ground, I expect so much fruit to be born. If I plant, especially a farmer who's done it many years, he kind of gets an idea of what crop to expect. But when he goes and gets the crop out, and he finds out the crop was not just wheat, let's say, but also thorns and thistles, he suddenly discovers the fact that his crop did not bear as much fruit as he thought. So already he's got a problem, but now he also has to spend his time to remove the thorns and the thistles, which also will take out more of the crop. And so when he's all done, he has even less. So it's not just, oh, this is going to be hard. This actually reduces the amount of fruit you expect. So you kind of go into your work with an expectation. You people who work, you know what I'm talking about. You go into it with an expectation, this is going to happen. Has anybody ever, I know some of you plan your day in the day planner or Franklin, and you have all your to-do lists, and you have your day planned at the beginning, and then at the end of the day, you go back and look at the list as well. That didn't happen. It never works the way you expect it to. And all the things you thought you were going to get done that day, you never get done. And if you go, that's daily, that's weekly, that's monthly, that's yearly. You take a look at it and you say, boy, I didn't get done anywhere near what I thought I was going to get done today. It never seemed to work out the way I want. And that's true of the work we do. That's also true of the fruit we collect. And this creates a problem for us, which actually comes out. So the result of all of it, the curse is you will have to work. The result will that you'll bring fruit with thorns and thistles, and the work will strain you. And, I kind of mentioned this already. I'm sorry I've missed my pictures. But this starts a cycle for us. And it's my little hamster on the old wheel. You ever see one of those guys that is boogity, 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 boogie? They don't go anywhere. The wheel keeps spinning. They just keep going. And they think they are. And they think they're getting somewhere. And it just goes round and round and round and round. They don't go anywhere. Because the crop's less than you think. So that says, well, we just need to work harder. right? Because I didn't get as much as I thought. I'm going to have to work harder. And that brings in less than I thought. So, I'm going to have to work even harder now, just a little bit more. Just a little harder, I think I'll be okay. If I just had a little more. And before long, money becomes your God because, I'm translating all the fruit into money because in our society, that's how it ends up. Eventually, it ends up that everything we do ends up in a paycheck. And that ends up in our bank. And so we suddenly start saying, boy, I don't have enough. If I just had a little more, though, I'd be okay. So maybe I need to work a little harder. Maybe I need to get a second job. Maybe we need to start a second income in the family. I need to do something because I'm just not getting there. What I thought I was going to get out of the crop that I've planted isn't coming true. It's less than I thought. So I need to work harder and just need a little more. And again, we'll be talking about this a lot more in the Gods of War series, but God, should be a small g, my bad there, is a being or an object believed to have more than natural attributes. This is against Miriam's, not the Bible. More than natural attributes and powers and require human worship, specifically one controlling particular aspect or part of our reality. So we end up putting all of our time, effort, and creativity into something because we need to somehow make up for the fact that we're not quite getting where we thought we're going to be. And it's a cycle, and it kind of lures us in. And the strange thing happens is as we start into this cycle, we start turning further and further and further away from God because we start thinking, if I just had a little more money, I'd be okay. And in fact, our prayer ends up being, either God's going to come through with a miracle or I'm going to find some more money. It's one or the other. And soon those prayers start becoming the same. And we start praying to God for money. Because what I really need, God, is more money. And you know that. If I had more money, I'd be okay. And God is watching his creation walk away from him. Because that was never the design. The design was never that the fruit of the field was going to bring you your salvation. The plan was always that God was going to take care of you. You may have heard, and this is misquoted, the love of money, or the money is the root of all evil. That's not the quote. The quote is actually, the love of money is the root of all evil, because that's what starts pulling our heart away. It's the love of it. And we talked about this last week. Jesus said, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he'll be loyal to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. Mammon is the spirit of money. You can't. So Jesus knows this, and he's saying that where your treasure is, your heart follows. J.D. Rockefeller, one of the richest men in America at the time, was asked, how much money is enough? And he says, just a little more than you have. He was a billionaire at the time he said that. They did a study, and they did a survey, and they asked Americans, this was done a couple years ago, how much more money would you need to be okay? And the study was almost unanimous. People thought just 10% more. It didn't matter if they made $20,000 a year or they were millionaires. Or if I just had 10% more, I'd be okay. That's just a little more, because it just seems like I'm cultivating my crop, and there's my thistles and there's my weeds. Boy, just 10% more, and I'd be okay. And so we kind of get caught up in this 10% more thing, and we start chasing that. Just 10% more. And we look at our lives, we say, I'm just not going to make it unless I can get just 10% more. And the strange thing is, God's saying, no, that's not your problem. Your problem isn't that there are thorns and thistles. That's the curse, but you're focusing on the wrong thing. He says in Malachi 3, you are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me. He says, the curse stands on you and everything you've created with your hands because you're robbing me. You've turned away from me. Your heart is no longer on me. You're not looking to me to provide for you. You're looking for me to provide money for you so you can provide for yourself. And God said, that's not how I designed you. That's not my desire for you. And you have robbed me. This whole nation has. He says the whole nation of Israel has. You have robbed me. And that's why you're cursed. And you're never going to beat the curse by working harder. But he does have a way out. Because the next part of this verse, where he says, look, you've robbed me by trying to take all the money and work on it yourself, and you basically counted me out of your lives, but I have a way out of this. But you're just not going to believe his way out. Because he says, look, bring the tithes, and we'll talk about tithe in a minute, in that there may be food in my house. He's talking about the temple. And test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts, and see if I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you such a blessing, there will not be room enough to receive it. And I will rebuke the devourer for your sake, so he will not destroy the fruit of your ground. What God's saying is, you're cursed, and the devourer is eating your lunch, literally. He's taking your lunch. He's just devouring your money. He's devouring your savings. He's devouring your inheritance, your marriages, your families. The devourer is loose because you're out of my protection, because you are off on your own doing this. So if you want to have the curse removed, here's what you need to do. You need to say, you know what? My heart's with you first. And that's why Jesus said, where your treasure is, your heart will follow. So God is saying 10% redeems the other 90%. So who is this devourer who's out there stealing things from us? Well, 1 Peter says, be sober and be vigilant. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. John 10, Jesus speaking, says, the thief does not come except to steal and kill and destroy. We talked about this a few weeks ago. This is the devourer. And in 2 Corinthians, Paul says, the God of this world has blinded minds so they cannot see the light of the gospel. So this is the picture of the devourer. He's going about like a lion, and he's stealing and killing and destroying. And when you take a look at this, you start realizing, oh, that's why we're not getting anywhere. That's why no matter how hard we work, we're losing, because we are up against this. It's not just we're up against work a little harder. We're not just up against sleep a little less, or be a little more diligent, or be a little better stewards. Not if there's a devourer out there destroying and killing. That's not enough. And we kind of start to get a picture, if you start looking what Jesus says and put it with what Malachi prophesied, that there's this real problem, and what we need more than anything is a protection from it. I don't know if you saw that Ziggy cartoon. It's you and me against the world. Personally, I think we're going to get creamed. And that's kind of the sense we get out of all this. It's like, it's us against the world, and the God of this world, who is bigger and stronger and more powerful than us. And I don't know about you, but I've spent my whole life getting creamed. And it's like, wow, just nothing I do seems to work. I don't ever seem to get ahead. And this is what God's trying to say. It's that there is a divide. It's not your imagination. You may think nothing's easy. It isn't. You may think things are stacked against you. They are. But he's saying, I'm offering you a way out, because this God is not the God. This is simply the God of the world. The God is our God.
I am a god, you dull creature, and I will not be bullied by that.
Puny God.
The God of this world, compared to our God, is a puny God. And he's saying, I will take care of that for you. I will rebuke the devourer for your sake. But you have to tag me in. You have to turn your heart back to me, and you have to say, you know what, God, I'm going to trust you. We sang trust and obey. And that's why he says 10% of your income, gross, not net, and he's talking about first part of your income, not after taxes. God says 10% goes to me first. Given to God's house, which is where you are fed. And the whole idea of that is that you're giving it to God to do whatever he wants with it. That's hard, right? And that is so that you might be blessed, and that the devourer is rebuked for your sake. This is God's plan. He's saying, if you do this, you are walking under my protection, and the devourer has no rights to you. Not to your family, not to your marriage, not to your inheritance, not to your money, not to your house, not to anything. The devourer no longer has a right, because you are now under my protection. Now, this is a hard teaching, and I'm going to be honest with you. We've struggled with this, Victoria and me, for almost our whole married life. We first heard the true message of tithing preached in 2003 by one of the best preachers of our generation, Robert Morris. And we listened to it. He has a 6-part series he does on tithing. It's a wonderful series. We listened to it, and oh, that's interesting, and we didn't change a thing. He re-preached it again in 2011, and we listened to it again. Well, that's kind of interesting, but we're not changing. Now, at that time, we were living in Virginia, and I was working for a defense contractor, and I was making more money than I had ever made in my life. And so we listened to this series again, and went, boy, we should tithe. We were giving, but we weren't tithing. We thought we really should tithe. And we looked at our income, and we thought, well, we can't. There's no way we could tithe. Do you know how much money that would be? You know, we're making a lot of money. 10% of a lot of money is 10% of a lot of money, still a lot of money. And so I'm basically saying, look, God, I can't give you all this. I need this. I'm living in Washington, D.C., one of the most expensive places on the planet. There's no way I can give you 10%. I know I'm making a lot, but you know what? We don't ever seem to have anything left over, so it's not like I have 10% lying around. So how can I give God 10% when I look at the end of the day and, you know, the end of the month, we're always at zero. So if I gave away 10%, that means we'd be overdrawn. That's not good stewardship. That's crazy. I'm not going to do that. And so God's basically challenging me. No, I want you to test me and watch if I won't make the 90% go further than your 100% is going. That's the challenge from God here. He's saying, I will rebuke the devourer. You don't have money, Mark, not because you don't make enough. And Lord knows that was true. I was making a lot of money then. I was making tons, but we had nothing to show for it. He said, the problem isn't how much you're making, and you can go on this cycle forever. The problem is the devourer is taking it from you. Test me in this, he says. And we just couldn't. So what we said is, okay, I tell you what. Victoria and I thought about it, prayed about it, talked about it. Let's do 5%. You know, 5% is still a lot of money because, you know, we're making a lot. So we're going to be giving a lot of money. God should be happy about that. You know, 5%. We will give 5% to God. And so we decided that's what we would do. So we started faithfully giving 5%. 30 days later, my salary got cut in half. Oops. Now, here's the thing. I don't believe for a second God took half my salary from me. I believe half my salary was not protected. So when the devourer came for my job, which he did, he only got 50% of it because the other 50% was protected. That's not strictly biblical. God kind of says all or nothing. He doesn't give you percentages. But I think God was literally trying to teach me a lesson here. He said, I protected half of it. When that happened, Victoria and I decided, you know what? We're here now. Let's just keep it going. We'll just keep writing the same check. And we're still living in D.C. I don't know how this is going to work. And 30 days after that, my job was taken away. But a week before my job was taken away, I got another one. Like before it happened. So when my job was taken away, I just kept going. And by the way, I made exactly the same amount of money I was tithing. And that's the way it's been. Through the midst of this recession, when things were bad, when the economy turned bad and things looked bad, we kept tithing, and through it all, the income was protected. My check, and I've realized this for a while, does not come from whoever's name is on it. My check comes from God. It always has. And by the way, nothing comes to me from Spirit Chapel. But I'm talking about my day job, my tent-making job. God protects it because we tithe. And it took us a long time to get there. I mean, we're talking years and years. I know it's a hard teaching. But I also know God says, test me and see if it's not true. Now, is there a devourer? I grew up here, guys. If you don't believe there's a devourer, you haven't looked around our neighborhoods. I mean, you will not believe what it's like for me to come back after having been gone for 30 years and see what's happened to Elizabeth Township. I can't believe my eyes. And say, well, yeah, but the steel mill closed. Yeah, but we were in Texas, and the oil boom, the oils went bust in Texas. And it had the same impact on their economy that our steel mill. You should be out there now, though. Nothing like what we have here. They also the buckle of the Bible Belt. Now, I actually did a search to try to find out if there's any correlation between Christianity and blessings in the land. And I couldn't get it because all the people doing the studies are academics, and they always mix all religions in together. So you get the Buddhists, and they're trying to say, does religion change? And the answer to that, by the way, religion doesn't. And that doesn't surprise me at all. That's what I would expect. But I don't think it's coincidental that if you find an area of faithful, believing Christians who are actively involved in their churches and tithing to God and doing His will, that area seems to be this pocket of blessing. And it's not that God just throws money their way, it's that God's protecting what they have. So if we're looking at the fact that right now marriages are under attack, in the church as well as outside of the church, unfortunately. The divorce rate in churches is exactly the same as the divorce rate outside of churches. Sad but true. The children are under attack. Boy, we see that. Those of us who are parents and we see this, I mean, it's scary what's happening to children these days. Inheritance. It used to be, my grandfather was a missionary. He left an inheritance for my father. That's amazing to me. I mean, he didn't make money, and yet he somehow, over time, had saved it. But inheritance, it never made it to me. It was gone before I got it. I never saw any of that. Inheritances are being stolen. Schools are being overrun right now. Churches, I'm sorry to say, churches. Like, walk around the churches in the area and watch what's happening. Businesses, it all is under attack. And God is saying, listen, I am going to protect you from the attack of the devourer, but you're going to have to trust me. And I guess the way I looked at it after we struggled with it for a decade, and we can't do that, was what I'm doing isn't working. I've managed 100% of my money for a long time, and it's not going anywhere. I'm not succeeding. So maybe I should just go ahead and trust God. And then when we started stepping out, we started to see God rebuke the devourer for ourselves. And then you started realizing, well, maybe there is something to this. And as you start stepping out more and more in faith, you realize that having God defend you against the devourer is amazing. It's one of the most amazing blessings and promises in the Bible. And God promises things and can't rebuke them, can't revoke them, because he's perfect. That's what he says. When I make a promise, when I make a covenant, you can count on it. Take it to the bank. It'll never change, because God's perfect. He never changes. In the immortal words of John Wayne, life is tough, but it's even tougher if you're stupid. I mean, after a while, I kind of took a look at this and said, well, I'm not going to be stupid about this. I mean, I have a cause and effect here. I've tested it in my own life, and I've seen it for real. It's for real. When I do what God tells me to do, I have his protection on our whole family. And I'll tell you something, there was never a doubt in our mind when Stas was in Afghanistan of us not tithing. Boy, if there's ever a time you want protection on your family when they're out, I mean, that's an amazing feeling to say, God, rebuke the devourer. Protect. And God is faithful. You need to accept God's protection, because if not, you're going to get creamed. There is a devourer out there, and he wants to destroy you. It's a scary thought if you think about walking outside the door and there's somebody waiting to destroy you.